Strap in and get comfortable, because we might be here a while.
Sketchmate this.
Hey everybody, Sketch here with more Tyranny X-Files, and yes, I am fully aware that I'm like 6 months late with this. Basically, I watched the season, I then sat down to record for like 45 minutes, talks about 8 episodes, only to then discover that my old camcorder had decided not to record any of it. It had this thing where it would come up with recording, but then you couldn't operate it or anything afterwards. So I lost all that time. And then, of course, I had to wait until I could get a new camcorder. And then since, I've just not... Stuff's been going on, and I've really not been in the mood to sit down and do this again, because I put so much energy into doing it last time. I was like, I don't want to do that again and then lose everything again. So yeah, it's taken me a while to get up the motivation to come back and do this. It does mean that it's been 6 months since I refreshed my memory on the show. But thankfully, this time's season is one I've seen many times, so a lot of the episodes are pretty fresh in my memory. Because yes, we are up to Season 2! Quite possibly one of the most perfect and yet perfectly flawed seasons that there are of this show. There was a lot to live up to after Season 1, which was a lot more impressive than I gave it credit for originally. And of course, we have to address the big elephant in the room. Sorry, Gillian, I didn't mean to refer to you as an elephant, but yeah, let's refer to talk about Gillian's pregnancy, because about halfway through, near the end of Season 1, Gillian Anderson discovered that she was pregnant with her first child, Piper, with her then husband, Clyde Klotz, was it? I can't remember. He was somebody who worked on the show. So, you know, I think there might have been a lot of push for any other show at that time, especially, would have just recast her. But they didn't. Chris Carter had fought a lot to get her on the show, you know, cast her as Scully in the first place. Again, against studio backlash. So they were like, well, what do we do? What do we do? And we'll get into this when we get into these episodes later on. I say later on, in a bit, depending on how long I'm talking about the first couple of episodes. But I think it really changed up as a result. We ended up with the myth arc throughout the show, for better or worse. And of course, these first few episodes, particularly, are weirdly shot because they're trying to cover up Gillian's pregnancy bump, which by this point was, you know, she was heavily pregnant by the start of Season 2. So there are a lot of weird angles. A lot of shots from the top, and there are a lot of hilarious, weirdly kind of set up shots where she's stood behind Mulder, and we'll get to those in like the next 2 episodes time. But yeah, there are some hilarious shots in that. But at the same time, I think it's an interesting start to the season. Because as a result, you end up with, you see more of Mulder's struggle. Don't want to bring up my struggle at all, but you see more of Mulder's struggle and how even one season, 1 year with Scully has changed his approach to investigating and stuff like that. So, before I waffle on, let's start out, shall we, with Little Green Men. Written by Morgan and Wong, are MVPs of the of Season 1, who unfortunately, Season 2 was the season that we said hello to Darren Morgan proper. I don't think he'd done anything in Season 1. but, you know, he starts out writing here. We say hello to Frank Spotnitz, Kim Manners, Vince Gilligan, all the people that this show, you know, was so synonymous with. But unfortunately, this is Morgan and Wong's last season for a couple of seasons, until like season 4, and then they left again. And again, we'll get to that when we get there. I think I could be wrong. My memory, I was going to check this up before recording. I didn't get round to it. I think they went off to work on Space Above and Beyond. Could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's what they went off to do. We still got quite a few episodes in this season written by them. So, but they start out strong with Little Green Men, which is an interesting follow-up to the Erlenmeyer Flask. It's not connected, but at the same time it is. You know, we got a lot of, they reference a line I'm not a big fan of. So you see Mulder and Scully, you know, the X-Files have been closed, they've been separated, and yet, sorry, not the microphone, and yet there's this concern, you know, from Scully. She's worried about Mulder, and you see how far Mulder is just lost as he's put on these stakeouts, you know, wiretapping. And he's so bored, and not only does he not have the X-Files, he doesn't have Scully there to keep him sane. Maybe keep some of his thoughts in check. And I think it's fascinating to see how, I mean, we kind of saw it at the end of Erlenmeyer Flask, but it's fascinating to see, like, just the bonds they have forged within that year of, you know, trouble and strife. But yeah, you see, Scully is worried about Mulder. She sees him like wandering the hallways, completely distracted and non-respondent, and she's worried about him. So she makes these plans to meet up with him. You know, by apparently the secret code that they've apparently set up at some point to make sure that they stay in contact. You know, any other partners would have just been like, okay then, moving on with my job, goodbye. It was a great year. But they've apparently set up this code for, you know, if they learn anything, to keep in contact. And they meet up in this, in, I think it's the Watergate car park or something. It's hilarious. But Scully makes this, the one thing I don't like about this episode, Scully makes this comment about how apparently in the shadows, for a moment, she thought Mulder was Deep Throat. And I'm like, oh no. Oh no. So, my first issue, you know what, it's one thing when they're like, oh, who is this Deep Throat character? You know, kind of referring to him as this informant that doesn't have a name. To refer back to the Watergate scandal. It's a whole other thing when they're actually using that as a character name. It's one thing when they call Cigarette Smoker Man like Smokey Man, Smokey, or Smoking Man, or Cancer Man, or whatever, because it's a descriptive thing when they don't have a name to refer to them as. But yeah, there's just something really odd. I know they didn't know Deep Throat's name, but like, to just refer to him as Deep Throat, it just felt a bit clunky. I'm also confused why, knowing that he's dead, why she would think that Mulder's, you know, Deep Throat. They don't even look remotely, their silhouettes are not even remotely similar. But I get it. It's a narrative tool to lead on to, like, exposition, especially for people that are joining the show. You know, I think if you didn't watch season 1, Little Green Men is an amazing introduction back into the characters. You're starting out with them fresh. Unfortunately, this is a cycle that would get quite repetitive with the show. Is this kind of going back to the status quo so that then you can start a new season and make it appealing to new viewers. And it's like, oh my god. Because those of us that stuck with it are like, we've been here. We've done this like a million times before. But Little Green Man is really good at setting up, you know, we see where Mulder and Scully are, like, an undisclosed number of months after the end of Erlenmeyer Flask. You we see again this worry. Scully's like, stay in contact, don't go alone. You're not crazy. She's been really supportive, and it's really nice to see. Of course, it's touching, so it's even cuter. But we then get Mulder go off on this lead from Senator Matheson, played excellently by is it Raymond J. Barry, who unfortunately did not come back more. He's literally only in about 2-3 episodes. I get it's difficult with, say, a senator, like an actual authoritative body in the US government, to keep that character involved with the storyline. Otherwise you bleed too much into like the real world and what senators have the power to do and stuff like that. So I get why he was used sparingly, as well as obviously scheduling and stuff like that with the cast, the guest star. But yeah, it would have been nice to see a bit more of Senator Matheson. But yeah, Senator Matheson, this apparent, like, somehow connection that Mulder has, I assume via his family. He gets this lead to go to Arecibo base, where these signals have been received from the Voyager probe and stuff. And Mulder goes there on his own. He doesn't tell Scully where he's disappeared to. And he goes off and he investigates this, and there is a little side plot with the is it Puerto Rican guy? And I'm just like, that felt completely unnecessary. But I think otherwise, if that guy wasn't there, the Mulder wouldn't have anything else to do there. I think that's the problem with this episode, is if this needless side plot wasn't there, there would be nothing else going on there. So it's a catch-22 situation. But actually, other than Mulder's interest in like voice messages to Scully, like these tapes that he makes to catalogue the evidence that he has, to share his thoughts and his kind of investigative thoughts with Scully, that she's the person he's making these tapes for, to just go, like, kind of, if anything happens, that she's the one that's going to prove this stuff, to bring this truth to light, kind of thing. And of course we get lines like, before I could only trust myself, now I didn't trust anybody, now all I trust is you, but they've taken you away from me. And I'm just sat there going, oh my god. It's so cute. It feels a little forced, obviously. Again, it's only season 2, but yeah, it's fascinating to see that friendship, that bond kind of thing. But in the meantime, we see Scully try to figure out where Mulder's disappeared to. And her sneaking around from people and lying to people and hiding is hilariously just amazing. It's so good, because at the same time they're still trying to film Gillian from like the chest up. So she's sneaking around. She's wearing this massive coat that she wore at the end in the Erlenmeyer flask. She's wearing this massive trench coat to try and hide the bump. And it's kind of hilarious to watch her go around in this airport and that, trying to track down Mulder and avoid these other agents. I just find it a really good episode. I find it really well written. I said this a lot in season 1. I really enjoy the interactions between Mulder and Scully, the bond they have. I love the introduction of Senator Matheson. Just generally, it's a good Morgan and Wand script, and I'm glad that they handled it. I think this is the kind of episode that Chris Carter could have done, and it just would have gone wrong so badly. So, yeah, I think they should be left to just handle a lot of the. They should have been left to handle a lot of the kind of openers and closers, because they were that good. So, yeah, without question, this is a S rank episode. I highly recommend it. One as a standalone episode, but really as an opener that is kind of Mifark-ish. I think it's a nice, gentle intro, because unfortunately a lot of the Mifark becomes way too convoluted and not very easily accessible for people. Whereas, again, this just shows the characters where they are, where they're starting out, and where they're trying to go from there. So we then lead on, Little Green Men wasn't a Chris Carter episode, but next up we have The Host, which is a Chris Carter episode, and you can tell. No, that's not fair. This episode, of course, is most famous for the Fluke Man. We finally get Darren Morgan on board, and apparently their first thought when he came on board was, so you want to be a writer with us? How about you put on this latex condom, body condom, that you then can't pee out of? I won't deny, this is an amazing makeup job for the Fluke Man. And I can imagine it be, just looking at it, you're like, that must be so claustrophobic in there. For what it, the time and that, I think it's a really good makeup job and monster design. Sorry, my chair's really creaky. But yeah, so we have this interesting story of like this Russian submarine with nuclear waste on, where somebody becomes mutated because they fall in the nuclear waste. That's the basis for this episode, and then we end up with somebody who's apparently evolved, devolved, poke-evolved into a massive fluke. And I think I have issues with this episode. I just feel it drags a lot. It feels like it goes like, this is happening, this is happening. You feel like you peak about halfway through, and then it's like trying to essentially get rid of the evidence of the paranormal mutant. So yeah, I feel like the second half really struggles pacing wise. And it just seems to, it just really seems to drag on. Again, it's interesting to see Scully who's, working at Quantico. Apparently, as we see in season 9, she does sod of work there, it seems, because Mulder and his work is just constantly stopping her from doing, what she's actually there to do. But it's interesting to see her pulled in, and she's like, oh, well, and they have this cute little moment in the office where Mulder suggests maybe they're looking for a 6-foot sized fluke, and she's like, what are you talking about? That's bloody crazy. And they have this moment where she's like, oh, it felt like old times, and I'm like, oh my god. So sweet. And there's this just awkwardness shy awkwardness afterwards, which is even better and so well acted. But the thing is it brings up these plot threads and that, but then it drops them so quickly. So you get this sewage worker who is attacked by the Fluke Man in the sewers. He ends up with this massive puncture wound pattern on his back, where he's been infested by lava from the Fluke. And then later on, we're subjected to the grossest scene. This and the scene in Dead Alive, where Billy Miles sheds his skin, are just the two scenes that have always made me go, nope, 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 nope. I cannot watch those scenes. The scene of the sewage worker puking up this fluke worm. Oh, it's so gross. And you see him, like, you know, using the toothpaste to try and clear the taste out of his mouth and stuff. It's so gross and disgusting. But the thing is, I don't know, maybe I missed something? So if I did, somebody please tell me. You never find out what happened to the sewage worker. Like, you never then find out that he died. Did he just spit up the fluke and then he carried on? And also, like, so what happened to the fluke? Does that little fluke grow into a human-sized fluke worm? Or does it, like, just stay as this massive fluke, you know, this, because it's quite big what he spits up. It's quite bigger than, you know, what is normal. So the question is, I mean, the IDW comics that were originally canon did do its own issue, which showed, like, multiple flukemen down in the sewers. Unfortunately, I didn't think it was a particularly good comic issue, and it just felt like nothing but fan service. But at least it did investigate the, you know, what happened to these offspring of the fluke man. Because at the end, we're left with this image, you know, of the Mulder chopped it in the fluke man in half with the sluice gate. But then you see the fluke man, like, floating up in a toilet or something at the end, and its eyes open. And you're like, is that the same fluke? Or is that a different one of its offspring? And, you know, it's just tied off at the end that it's a product of man, and it was born in this, you know, this nuclear waste kind of thing. And you're like, that may be the case, but it did still impregnate, you know, the sewage worker and that. It did still have larvae, you know, baby flukes. So I feel like pacing wise the episode really drags. It has some really good moments and it has a good first half. But then it tries to explain itself away. It tries to, I don't know, it tries to rationalize stuff, and you're just like, and then it just doesn't seem to know what it wants to do. So it is good to see the introduction of X, who, for those who don't know, you don't see him in this episode. You just see from the back of this chair. But originally, X was played by a woman. It was only when filming Sleepless that they then changed it to Stephen Williams. So it's interesting that the scene where we see X appear would have had to have been refilmed as well. But it's fun to see the introduction of X and see him say something like, you know, you have a friend at the FBI. And Mulder immediately assumes it's Scully because he's been talking about quitting, to which she freaks out and is like, no, you can't do that. Please don't do that. I don't want you to leave. But I never really thought about, he's actually talking about Skinner. And I think it's interesting for the longest time, I thought X was talking about himself. And then I was like, well, wait, I don't think he is at the FBI. And I was like, oh, they're talking about Skinner. So that's an interesting little thread. There are interesting things here, but I just feel, maybe as well, it's one of those episodes that gets hyped a lot. And I think a lot of it's just the monster design is so memorable and creepy that I think for a lot of people that is what overpowers their opinion on this episode. I would have to put it, I don't think it's a bad episode. I genuinely think it has a good place in the show. I'm going to put it in A. Because, like I say, it's not about it. It just, sometimes you have to be in the right mood for it. There are times I will watch it and I'll be like, I love this episode. When I watched this episode, like the end of last year, I was just sat there going, is this episode seriously still going on? It just, yeah, it just dragged sometimes. So I'll put it in an A. I don't know what it's going to be like compared to some of the episodes. I may move it. But for now, let's just leave it there and we'll adjust from there. Because next up we have Blood. Written by Morgan and Wong. I think it's a screenplay by them, but it's based on a story by Glenn's brother Darren. And you can feel Darren Morgan's influences here. There's a couple of lines, like when Mulder sees the broken doorbell and is like, Jehovah's Witnesses, you know. And you're like, that's such a Darren. It's either a David Duchovny or a Darren Morgan line. But the problem is I feel like there might be too many writers spoiling the broth here. Because it's not a bad episode. But again, this is one that just has a kind of unsatisfying ending. I think it's a really good episode in that it's the first episode that deals with that whole idea of pesticides being used to spread this fear toxin. I mean, it's used for the flies, but the fact that it then affects the townspeople is interesting, and again plays into later episodes that deal with spraying and stuff like that, crop dusting and that. So your main character here is Ed Funch, who is afraid of blood, hence the title. And he starts to see, because he's been affected by this fear toxin, pesticide, he starts to see on electrical devices, to kill them all. He gets fired, so it kind of, his emotional state is in a place where he's then susceptible to these fear these messages. But the thing is you see other townsfolk affected, and their phobias make way more sense. Way more sense than Ed's. I get that they were inspired by some real life events and stuff like that, and real life shootings, but you see one guy who's affected in an elevator, and it's because he's claustrophobic. So when he starts seeing like signs, they're going to take your air, this, that, and the other, on the digital display in the lift, it makes sense that he freaks the hell out and has a panic attack and kills everybody because his brain is telling him that they're going to suck all the air out of this tiny box. As somebody who's claustrophobic, I can completely sympathise with that. So that makes sense. And then later you're introduced to this woman who kills a garage worker, mechanic, because she thinks he's going to rape her because she has a past of being attacked. That again makes sense that this would play into her fear, and seeing the readout would make her attack this guy before he could hurt her. Makes sense. But then Ed, who this whole episode is like seeing these messages and not doing anything about it, his fear is blood, and his answer to deal with this blood is to shoot at people, which would then cause more blood. Now, I know it's a mental health issue, it's a psychotic episode issue, it's, there's a number of things here that can be explained away, but I didn't feel that his phobia was anywhere near as compelling or just like made as much sense to come up with this, shooter in a tower kind of scenario. as some of the other situations did. So that felt unsatisfying for me. And especially then, you see at the end that actually Mulder was affected, because he then sees the all done bye-bye on his phone screen. His old classic Nokia phone. I'm pretty sure I had that phone at one point. But, you could see that he's affected, which, again, like, I feel season 11's Kitten played way too much into. Recovering that kind of story thread where you see at the end that Skinner pulls out this tooth, which is a side effect that's been affected the townsfolk when they're dealing with the crop dusting. That's obviously an issue with Kitten because obviously this came first. But it is interesting to watch these episodes back and see and remember what's been copied later on down the line, kind of thing. But this is the episode that has this bizarre thing. So they wait at the bus stop where there's this blood drive happening, where they think that Funch is going to turn up. And I don't know why. Like, I get hide the police, but I don't know why Mulder and Scully need to hide because they're just in suits. And considering how many people you see at that bus stop that are in suits, it's like, why do these two need to hide? But even worse is you then have Scully stood behind Mulder. It is the funniest thing to behold. Because again, they're trying to hide Gillian's bump. So you have Gillian stood behind Mulder in this alcove. And of course, she's so much shorter than Duchovny anyway. So then you have Duchovny stood there, and like this little head pops up from behind him, which kind of makes it look like she's groping his ass while she's back there. But it's just so awkward. And I'm like, really? This is what you went for? So yeah, it's a little odd in that sense. But yeah, I like the episode. I really like the episode. It has some nice kind of actiony set pieces, like with the woman who attacks Mulder, because again, she thinks he's going to attack her and stuff like that. It has, and again, it's only there to get Mulder cut so that then there's blood conveniently through his bandage for Funch to react to. But generally, I didn't really feel for Ed. It was so much of him just like spending a lot of time getting more and more frustrated and doing the whole thing, and I'm just like, oh my god. And I'm not saying it's badly acted, because it's not. I don't feel necessarily that the script fully I don't feel it connects in the way that it could. It's not a bad episode by any means, but I do feel it's very middle of the road. And it's annoying, because whenever I think of season 2, I always think of Blood as a good episode. But yeah, I just found it a bit... So I think I would put this in B for now. Again, I'm tempted to move the host down. But I think I really need to think about this. But yeah, no, I get why people like it. I like it. I've always liked it. But on my rewatch, I think it's another one of those episodes you just have to be in the mood for, maybe. But anyway, that's Blood. Next up is Sleepless, which is when we get more X, and of course the introduction of Alex Krycek. Good old rat boy. This is actually an important episode character-wise. Introducing Krycek. Again, seeing Mulder trying to avoid Krycek to get... Because obviously that's not something he would have done with Scully. He doesn't know this guy for anything. But he's... Mulder's trying to get information from X. X is offering up this intel and stuff about... can we just talk about the genius casting here of Tony Todd as the guy who cannot sleep. They actually got the guy. I mean, Tony Todd is an amazing actor anyway, and you know, classic horror actor. But you know, to get the guy who played Candyman, as a guy that cannot sleep is just genius casting. But the fascinating thing is, sorry, I went off track. I had to say, I want to talk more about Tony Todd's casting here, because he is amazing in this role. As this antagonist, essentially, that you actually feel for. There's no real villainizing this guy. You feel so sympathetic for him. Yeah, he's doing bad things. He's killing people that were involved in this experiment back in Vietnam to kill, this kind of rage induced killing spree on villagers in Vietnam that involved the deaths of women and children. But I think it's amazing that he's so sympathetic, and the fact that his last scene, like when he just wants to, and you feel that from Todd, that longing, I just want to sleep. It's so hard. I mean, as somebody who struggles to sleep sometimes, that goes from, one side of sleeping too much to not sleeping at all. That longing to just want to get to sleep, and the fact that he hasn't done it for, 25, 30 years in this episode. You can't help but feel for him and just hope that he gets that sleep. At that final shot that Krycek takes, either because he was actually affected or because he's trying to cover up the experiments, because at this time we do not know that he's actually, until the very last scene, we don't know that Krycek's working for a cigarette smoking man. So it's interesting. It's funny to watch Krycek's story as well through this. While you're trying to care about these soldiers that have been affected, you're also engaged in this story of Krycek's introduction, who I feel is actually introduced really well as this green agent who, has apparently looked up to Mulder in the academy. And I think that's another thing, that it's nice to see that come back every now and then, is that, Mulder was seen as this wonderkind at the Quantico. To see somebody else go, look, I looked up to you. Now, that may not be true. That may be the line that Krycek's been given to feed to Mulder. I don't know where his, when he was enrolled into the syndicate. But I think it's really well done seeing, his introduction, seeing how Scully deals with Mulder turning up with this other guy who's now his, not partner, but, working with kind of thing. It's so fun to see Scully's reaction, where she's just... And then she and Mulder just have this... While they're talking about this autopsy of this guy who's been found in this rigid state of believing he was in a fire, Mulder and Scully are sharing these, in hushed tones, sharing these possibilities and these theories and stuff. And then you see Krycek, creeping, watching them, yeah, whatever, splitting them up has not done anything whatsoever, so I'm going to report this back to my bosses. It's just a really interesting dynamic. And then you see Mulder and Scully's phone calls, where Scully finally has her own office. It's a shame they took that away from her. She has her own office where she's calling Mulder from to discuss more thoughts and autopsy report findings and stuff like that. And then she's asking, so how's Krycek? And Mulder's like, no, not as good. I don't know how I put up with you for so long. And it's so cute. But again, it's another facet to this partnership, and seeing how they're adapting to the being apart but somehow still leaning on each other. And then you've got this outside force, as usual for them, that's there disrupting their their dynamic. I just think it's really well written. I'm pretty sure this is another Morgan and Wong script. I could be wrong. I'll put down. I'll put a little note if I'm wrong. I could have sworn this is a Morgan and Wong one. But I genuinely just really enjoyed this. So yeah, I just always enjoy coming back to this one. It can plod at times, but just the character dynamics, and this sympathetic anti-hero, antagonist kind of character. Yeah, I genuinely felt for him, and there's some amazing cinematography here when you see them go down like the back in the railway station. I think they said, I don't know if it was this for this episode or another one. They said that they were using to help light. They would like use balls of foil to reflect the light, and you would get people come in and go, "Well, are we going to set up the lights?" And they're like, "No, this is how we're filming it." And it's so dark in this scene, but it's so tense filled, matched with the music. I genuinely like this one. I think it's really well shot, really well told, and a really interesting, if not unsettling, concept. Where again we're dealing with these government conspiracy experiments on soldiers and that to make these super soldiers, if you will. I have to put it as an S rank. It's that enjoyable. Yeah, I don't question that at all. I just think it's a really good episode. Well, next up we've got the big ones, the start really of the myth arc proper. And I have just noticed how long it's taken me to just talk about the first 4 episodes. So I'm going to try and get through this as quickly as I can. Bear with me. It's been 6 months. I'm trying to get back into the flow of pacing. But let's start this out with Dwayne Barry. The titular character, brilliantly played by Steve Railsback, is a really good kind of negotiator style episode, where we see Dwayne Barry, you know, he possibly has these delusions of being abducted, but they might be real. So Mulder's called in to investigate. We have that amazing scene of him getting called out of the pool by Krycek, and he gets out in his Speedo with clearly it was nice warm water in there. So there's that already we're starting with an iconic scene. But he gets called in to work with this escaped patient, Dwayne Barry, who claims to be trying to get to an abduction site. And it's interesting to see Mulder working with the negotiation team, like the ATF and stuff, and CCH Pounder's FBI agent. It is a shame to not really see his profiling skills come into play. I think that could have been something that they could have lent on a lot more, other than him going, explain to me this, explain to me that, tell me about him, you know, stuff like that. That I felt was a missed opportunity. But otherwise, I love seeing Scully's at home and Mulder's calling her up to get some info on Dwayne Barry and stuff that he's not getting from the ATF team. It's fun to see their back and forth, and then she turns up at the offices after Mulder goes in. And my favourite bit, up there with son of a, gash you out this life for good, you son of a bitch, is she's demanding to speak to somebody in charge, and Krycek comes over and goes, calm down, and she does this like jump, like, don't tell me to calm down. I'm like, oh my god, if she turned around and punched Krycek in the face, then it would have been beautiful. But I think it's a really well paced, really well written episode, with some amazing imagery. The set piece of Dwayne Barry on the abduction table is such really good set design. It is creepy as all hell. The drill, the mouth drill, and that comes down. Just all of that imagery is genuinely disconcerting and makes you feel sympathetic for Dwayne Barry, even though you're still questioning, is he sane? Clearly not, but you know, and it's just, yeah, I just find it really well written, really well paced, and I think it's an excellent start to this, let's call it a trilogy. We'll talk about 3 in a minute, but you know, this trilogy of Dwayne Barry Ascension and One Breath. I think it's a really strong start that continues on. We have, of course, Scully at the end scanning this implant because she randomly got the idea for a barcode. And that poor shop teller at the end where Scully swipes it and then walks off like la 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 la. I'm like, wow, Scully, seriously. I am confused about how the barcode reader at the till was able to read this microscopic barcode. I mean, I have trouble self-scanning stuff with the barcode quite big, so I don't believe for a second, especially in the 90s, that it would have read this tiny micron barcode. But I think it's a good piece of, it's a nice, it's a nice piece of Deus Ex Machina, I guess. But yeah, I think it's a really good episode, always enjoyable to watch. There are missed opportunities, but everybody's really good at it, acting in it, and I just find it an enjoyable episode. So without question, it has to go up in the S rank. But it's difficult then when you're like, well, that's rank, but how does that go against these other ones? Because Ascension, following up after Scully's been kidnapped by Dwayne Barry and packed into the trunk of a car. That poor Gillian, seriously. This heavily pregnant woman, and they're like, right, so you're about to pop. Let's stick you in this trunk. Now, obviously, there's techniques in that to help with that, but like hide if she's really in a trunk or that. But it is still funny to consider. But you have this tense build-up of Scully's mum randomly turning up at her house. I can't remember. Did Mulder call her? And he's trying to explain to Maggie, I'm going to find her and stuff like that. You see these flashes of Mulder deducting what has happened at the kidnap site, which finally shows a bit of his profiling skills, but at the same time doesn't really show. It in a way, it shows these nice flashes that give exposition for Scully's side of things. I don't feel like they really show Mulder investigating per se, but I just think they're nice little flashes, and in a way, it's nice that they're nodded to in season 8, where Scully has these flashes of what she imagines Mulder's going through. So I do like those connecting pieces. Unfortunately, Dwayne Barry's killed off like quite early on in the episode, but I say that there's this whole, it's near the end of the episode, but not quite, if you know what I mean. This whole tense chase up the mountain on the ski lift is excellently shot. The editing can be a little iffy. Like, they went out of their way to get David Duchovny up on top of the ski lift. I say ski lift, it's the tram thing. My brain has gone blank, sorry. Language not good. But he, they went to this effort of actually getting him up on top of it. And there are so many cuts, you can't always see that it's actually Duchovny. It could still be his stunt double, and you wouldn't really notice. I do find that a little frustrating. But otherwise, really well shot. I love the pure anger and rage that surges through Mulder when he sees Scully's blood and hair on the hospital wristband. And you see this dark side that he could go to, you know, if anything's happened to Scully. It's terrifying in a way. It's fascinating. But it is definitely dark, you know, kind of on a Star Wars level. And to see him hold back and just be, did you hurt her? You know, kind of thing. I found that fascinating to see, and just this helplessness. Again, I'm not one normally to rave about Duchovny's acting, but I genuinely felt that rage and frustration and emotion boil up in Mulder. That scene between Steve Railsback and Duchovny is intense. I'm a little unsure about the whole Krycek goes in to talk to him and then they just flat out kill Barry now. Like, at least scurry him away before you kill him. It just felt a little... I know they're trying to set up Mulder, in a way. It felt a little unnecessary in the grand scheme of the plot. But otherwise, do I prefer this over Duane Barry? No. But to be honest, I think it's I mean, I can't get better than S rank, can I? I certainly would put it up there. I definitely think it's an S rank. Because it's just that enjoyable, and it's got amazing set pieces in it. The writing is good. Yeah, just genuinely all round. I think it's a good episode. And you know, this and Duane Barry, you know, they end with the to be continueds, and I mean, this one doesn't, I don't think. But certainly Duane Barry was like the first time we really saw it, and I don't think we've ever felt so much hatred for those three words. So what these two do up to set up, you know, Scully's brief departure, does it really well. I highly recommend them. I definitely recommend actually watching them back to back. You can get like the VHS where it has just those episodes on, and yeah, binge watch them back to back, because I think separating them will just make you stress out. You're like, wait, what happens if you don't know what happens? Just waiting to watch them is really stressful, and I don't know how we survived back in the 90s with week after week waiting, seriously. Next up is Free, and I'll be honest, this is an episode I don't really like. I've never really liked. I think mainly because, one, I don't really enjoy watching David Duchovny make out with his then girlfriend Perry Reeves. You know, keep that off the camera. No, I confess, I am not a fan of any kind of vampire stories. I avoided watching Buffy the Vampire Slayer for the longest time because I was like, yeah, I don't like vampire stuff. I just don't. I've never enjoyed it. You know, stuff like Dracula now, I just find boring. I don't know what it is. It's not that I don't find vampires scary or that. Like, the idea of them and stuff is unsettling. And I don't like blood, so, you know, I'm in an Ed Funch situation. But I just genuinely never like vampire stories. So I come into this vampire story that's written by Morgan and Wong with Chris Ruppenfall. And it just... I actually enjoyed this a bit more on this more recent watch through. But generally, I just find that this episode, much like, say, vampire stories, again, this is a very personal thing. I just find it plods. I think it's interesting to see emo, I don't sleep anymore, Mulder, completely lost in grief and whatnot, post Ascension. It's interesting to see Mulder's coping mechanism. There's something slightly frustrating. Mulder and Scully only get sex when they're angry or upset with each other, or missing each other. And apparently Mulder's way to deal with Scully being missing is to have sex with this vampire. But I don't have an issue with it. I just, it's just a tool that they use, and I find it a bit frustrating. I do have an issue with how Mulder hooks up with Kristen, because he goes to this club that they've been led to by the stamp on the guy's body. He goes there, and Kristen Killer is like conveniently the one that he hooks up with. I don't remember, maybe I missed something. I don't remember there being anything to go, this is the woman you need to speak with. She is the other part of this group. It just seemed really bad plot convenience that she was the one that actually spoke to him and was totally into him. I just, that was contrivance. I just found frustrating. The rest of the episode's not bad. It's got some nice makeup effects. But otherwise I just find it plods. If you're into vampire stories, then I think this will do it for you. I think you'll enjoy this. But for me personally, it's a means to an end. It's a waypoint for Mulder, him reopening the X-Files. And this is like his first case back in like 6 months or whatever it is. But at the same, it's just a waypoint to then get to Scully's return. And I don't find it all that strong. I mean, it's got a nice, like I say, the ending is really melancholy, kind of, you feel for Mulder, but there's this hope that he's still worrying about, thinking about where Scully might be in that. He's got wearing a cross and that, which is a little weird, but okay. But yeah, no, it just feels like a means to an end, and yeah, I find it's not a bad episode at all. I just find it very meh, and I think for that reason, normally I would have, normally I would have easily put this down here. But genuinely, I actually, maybe as I've wizened up and gotten more exposed to the vampire stories and stuff like that, maybe I've chilled out on the whole thing, and because normally I would have put it down here, but yeah, I think I'm going to put it on B, because I do think it's a very middle of the road story. But after that, of course, we get to go back to the Scully Returns with One Breath. Another Morgan and Wong story. Yeah, just, this is a really good episode. S rank easily, with no questions. Let's just put it up there, because this is a really tense, stressful watch. In hindsight, of course, we know nothing would ever happen to Scully. But at the time watching this episode, you're like, wait, is it even possible? Could Gillian have just come back to film her death scene kind of thing? But there is so much going on in this episode, and I love the fact that it brings a lot of the threads from these first few episodes together to make watching the lead up to the abduction arc really worthwhile. And I think that's the thing, other than blood, a lot of these things have been setting up characters, be that Krychek's introduction, X's introduction, revisiting in Little Green Men we have We see the flashback of Mulder's sister being abducted to introduce new viewers to what Mulder had gone through and stuff, and how that affects him going on through this series. We have that touchstone to go from, and of course the Mulder Scully relationship, friendship, partnership. But we get to this point as well where we've seen Maggie Scully show her trust in Mulder, handing over the cross, which unfortunately is the origin of which got retconned later on. But we see that connection where she believes that Mulder will find Dana, and she holds on to that hope and she trusts him, and you see her absorbing him into the family in this episode. There is so much where she and Melissa could have just turned him away, but they're like, no, you need to be here, kind of thing. And that's really, really important. And again, important to the family dynamic that Mulder has with the Scullys. Melissa ships Mulder and Scully, so unfortunately she has to get killed off pretty quickly. But I really enjoy Melinda McGraw as Melissa Scully. And it's interesting to see Mulder, who has been toying with the idea of retiring from the leaving the FBI when he doesn't have the X-Files, he doesn't have Scully there. And it gets to a point in this episode where he's just like, what if I'm the reason why she's in this state? If I'm the reason she... I think, you know what, if you ever want to know why tropes, etc. exist in fan fiction, there's a lot of stuff that Morgan or Wong brought, because, we have stuff like Mulder saying, what about if it's my fault? If while losing myself, I've lost Scully as well? What about if there were signs along the way where I should have warned her that it was going to be dangerous? It's because of her connection to me that she got abducted. And yeah, that's a heavy... It unfortunately gets used a bit too much and gets too into that kind of white knight trope, which can be a little infuriating at times through the show. But it's really fascinating to see. Again, this is only the start of season 2. This is really early on in their partnership. And I think, to be fair, this is probably why when Morgan and Wong came back, they were like, nothing's changed. Because this show has a bad habit of resetting each season. But it's fascinating to see those relationships. Mulder's encounter in the parking lot with X is still one of my favourite scenes. I've said this many times before. Just X, overstepping his boundary, like risking his life and saying, dude, you're risking my life. Deep Throat died. Scully's a lost cause. Stop it. Let's go after the truth and stuff like that. And Mulder's like, no, I owe her more than that. And it's interesting to see those boundaries clashing, where X is like, you need to kill, to cover your tracks and stuff like that. And Mulder, who, may I remind you, literally 2 episodes ago was ready to throttle Dwayne Barry in pure rage, is like, I ain't doing that. I ain't crossing that line. So I think it's interesting to see what side, how dark Mulder's psyche can get. But at the same time, just those moral lines he will not cross. Unless you mess with Scully. I think if he'd found that guy had anything to do with Scully's abduction, then yeah, that guy would have taken a severe bruising, before, when he wasn't getting shot by X. We have Skinner stepping up, giving the address of Smoking Man to Mulder via this very shady, bizarrely acted, not particularly well acted scene of this woman going to this cigarette machine and Mulder getting the address for Smoking Man, and having Smoking Man's first real... He's had a few speaking parts up to this point, but to have this scene where he's like, I've seen presidents die. We'll forget how much gets again retconned later, because that's what this show is good at doing when it can't remember its own continuity. But that scene between Mulder and CSM is excellent, and unfortunately they tried to recreate it so many times in the show later on that it gets stale really quickly. But this, for its first time, was really impactful. And that's the thing, there was so much going on in this episode. As you're watching it, with this whole connecting tissue of Scully just laying there. I will say it is slightly disconcerting to think of Gillian's, newborn daughter off to the side, ready to be tended to at the first necessary moment. And as a result, Gillian's feet are not covered, and it distracts me. This sounds really petty, but the whole episode I'm just sat there going, will somebody please cover her feet? She's in a hospital. If that was my feet, I'd be like, dude, put a cover over. But obviously, because she had to get ready to get up, I get why. That said, I totally don't get why the amount of surgical tape plastered to her face. I do get why the episode is called One Breast by fans as a joke, because obvious. But it's kind of weird to think of how they could have put a body double there for most of that and it wouldn't have mattered, to be honest. But there is so much. I love the family dynamic. I love that Mulder, who, again, earlier on in this season said, he learned to ask questions and that from Scully. And he's completely dismissing Melissa's new age, auras and stuff, beliefs. This very, paranormal belief that he normally would have just gone, please tell me what, I need to. But in this whole episode, he is fighting for answers. He is fighting for the truth. And we have a little weird DNA testing with the lone gunman who passed on her information to this other, and that seems a lot of fun, but at the same time it seems odd that they're the person he goes to for this DNA information. But I guess that's what you got to do when you're worried everybody's out to get you. But yeah, I just think there is so much here that is amazing, brilliant, a lot of good setup, a lot of good payoff for these previous episodes, and unfortunately, for better or worse, what happens to Scully post this episode is quite shitty, and it probably would have been better if she hadn't ever woken up again. But I think this arc is amazing to watch on back to back. The Worst to Be Continued have never been so stressful, except for maybe the end of Anasazi at the end of this season. But otherwise, this is an amazing arc. I don't think the show ever did an arc that was this good and well scripted. I think my biggest issue, unfortunately, is that the fact that the stuff that happens in these episodes are used as an excuse to come up with the most awful shit. Body testing, invasion of Scully's body that happens, after this set of episodes. But otherwise, I can't argue. Just well written, well acted, except for that one lady at the cigarette machine. I love a lot of the dynamics and the just the payoffs that are here. Highly recommend. One Breath. I think One Breath is an interesting episode to watch on its own. Because it does actually work on its own. If you just know that, they tell you that Scully was taken and stuff like that. So if you had missed the lead up, then you can actually totally watch this episode on its own. But it is way, way better if you watch the lead up. So no question that had to be an S. But unfortunately then we get to Firewalker. And you know what, for all of that payoff and that, Firewalker has the unenviable task of getting things back to the back to equilibrium, to the status quo, because this show was, it was supposed to be when it wasn't doing the myth arc, it was doing Monster of the Week, and it always gave the impression that things hadn't changed and stuff like that. So we've just had, except for Blood, we've had 8 episodes that have been a lot of lead up, a lot of threads have been put in to lead up to this Gillian having to disappear for an episode. And then you need to come back to the Monster of the Weeks that don't have any myth arc, any conspiracy. Krychek's gone. You need to not settle too much on the idea of Scully being back, so there's one throwaway line of Scully going, I've been away too long, I need to get back to work. You do have Mulder, and it's cute, you've got Mulder worrying, maybe you need some more time off. And again, it's cute to see, but it can get a little degrading in a way. And of course we have Bradley Whitford as a guest star, as well as Shawnee Smith. I do not remember the actor. I actually met Shawnee Smith at a convention, and I said that this episode was the first thing I remember seeing her in before she went on to stuff like Saw and stuff like that. And she was like, wow, that was a long time ago. And I was like, I know, but this is the first thing I remember you in. The problem is you've got a good cast here. And you've got an interesting, don't watch this if you've played The Last of Us. It deals on this spore that comes up with this penis monster essentially, that thrives in your lungs and will come out of your throat. But the biggest problem is with this episode, it's a poor man's Ice. It really is. I think this was written by Howard Gordon, and like I say, hats off to him. I would not have wanted to write the episode that had to come after One Breath, and that arc, seriously. But I think the problem is because I've always loved this episode, but I think the problem is because I've watched these episodes close together. If you're watching this as a standalone episode, without literally of watching Ice a month or so before, then it works reasonably well. There's nothing bad here per se. There's a lot of stuff that doesn't necessarily make sense, like when Shawnee Smith's character, who was totally into Bradley Whitford, which is understandable, when she's got the spore coming out of her, she is determined to have a new host there ready to dust jizz all over, I think is probably the best explanation for what happens. But when Tanaka earlier is ready to explode from his throat, he runs away. Which doesn't make sense, because surely the organism would be, its key drive would be to make sure it was around people. Now you could say that was just Tanaka's character, but I don't get why nobody really puts much thought into his sickness symptoms before this, especially Mulder and Scully, who have gone through Ice and Darkness Falls and stuff like that. It gets a little frustrating when you're watching it. I also do not know how Bradley Whitford's Tripkos is living down there in the volcano. I'm just like, okay. He's just there. He's got this like burn mark on his face and a bandage randomly round his head. But that's it. And at the end, he goes back with the body of his girlfriend, and Mulder and Scully are totally okay with leaving them there. And the mountains never get investigated. And it's such an open end. I think it was trying to either sequel bait or make you think or something. But to be honest, I come away and this is somebody who has always enjoyed this episode. I came away genuinely on this watch through just going, why? Like, so he's just out there, like, does he just starve to death or what? Does he kill himself? Yeah, it's claustrophobic. I love the idea of this silicon-based life form, which again questions Scully's science, but there's no real, it's just left there. Yeah, it just comes off as a poor man's Ice. I would much rather go watch Ice. It's not a bad episode, and that's the frustrating thing about it, because I have always enjoyed it. It's difficult. If I hadn't watched all these episodes so close together, I think I would have easily put this in. It's comparing it to Ice. I would love to put this in A. I'm gonna have to. I'm gonna put it in A for now, because it is a good episode. It's a good tense episode. It's just, I might move it. We'll see. I just feel like there's a lot of promise here with not much payoff. But anyway. Oh God. Okay. Red Museum. Okay. Red Museum, or as I like to call it, The X-Files Does Murder, She Wrote. This is a Chris Carter episode. And wow, can you tell? Because once the myth arc started, oh, there was no stopping him adding whatever he could here. Okay, so... okay, so Red Museum, this is an episode that has so many... It should actually be called, not Red Museum, Red Herrings Galore, or something. Red Herrings Are Us. It's ridiculous. There are so many threads here. You have Mark Rolston guest starring as the leader of this vegetarian cult. And I don't even... There are so many questions I have about the Church of the Red Museum. But apparently, like, they're seen as the weirdos, and I think I have to agree with stuff that was said in season 1, where the idea, so thank you to my commenters, I agree that there's a level of, you know, this was the 90s and that, so they're showing these odd outside groups as these oddities, but yeah, the vegetarians who do nothing in this episode, they're seen as these weirdos, and they're treated like shit by the meat eaters. So they're a vegetarian group that set up shop in this beef town, basically. And they are treated like crap by the local townsfolk, especially the teenagers. But the thing is they start out with these, with this whole group meeting of the Church of the Red Museum. And they show what Mulder describes as walk-ins, because they show a psychic connection between Mark Rolston's character and this other leader of the group. as he's typing up the like the sermon kind of thing, and she's reading it without reading it, essentially. And Mulder like just randomly uses the term walk-ins, which is something that gets touched upon much later in the show in season 7, and then it gets forgotten and pushed aside. So you have this possible psychic connection issue, like story with them, but then it turns out that one of the teenagers who is attacked, apparently his family is being spied on by a paedophile through their mirror, a hole in the wall that he can see through their mirror, and he's found out, and all these tapes of the family and that, but actually he's the one that's like writing he is one and she is one on the back of the teenagers, but actually it's kind of nothing to do with him. So then you're thrown in the crew cut man who killed Deep Throat. I'm not even shitting you. It then brings up the crew cut man who killed Deep Throat at the end of season 1, and apparently he's using these vials of some like some offshoot of purity, the black oil or something, and the doctor was injecting the teenagers in the town, and the church and the museum were being used as a control group. And oh my god, I am not even kidding you, I know how this episode ends, and I'm sat there just rewatching going, wait, what? There is so much here. Chris Carter is just like, I'm going to take this idea that he obviously got from somewhere, and I want to feed it into the bigger conspiracy. And it genuinely felt like an episode of Murder, She Wrote. There were so many red herrings here. It could be the church and museum. No, it's not. It's this paedophile. It is, but it's not. It's a crew cut man, but he gets killed and we get no answers. And ta-da! This episode, again, is another episode that on its own, if you turn your brain off, it's not the worst episode you could watch. It's not. If it's a choice between this and Gender Bender, I would rather watch this. But it is so sloppy and all over this place. And you're wondering who this old guy is that tells Mulder and Scully about the experiments on these cows. And you're like, am I losing my mind while watching this episode? It is so bizarre. It is just, it's like, let's just throw everything in the air, see what stays up there, see what lands. It's so bizarre. It's not about, it's just sloppily written and sloppily conceived. I'm gonna have to put it in the B rank, because it's just all over the place. Again, it's not the worst acting or anything. It's just, oh my god. So, anyway, next up, we have got Excelsis Day. This is another one of those episodes that I love, but one, I don't often watch it, and two, it's great until you think too much about it. I'm pretty sure writer Paul Brown watched the movie Awakenings and was like, how can I make this a little bit paranormal? Because it's set at a nursing home. Was it a convalescent home? Anyway, with about all of 4 patients, 4 elderly people, and it starts out with a guest star Tara Rovery's character being raped by a ghost. So yes, that great old subject that the X-Files does just the worst. Because if you think this is going to be like the main crux of this episode, no. Basically, it's implied that she might be making it up, that she might have hurt herself to get attention, and then the case essentially gets dropped. Mulder and Scully are so ineffectual in this episode, because what it turns out is these, again, all of the 4 elderly people that live here, including, is it Frances Bay? The Happy Gilmore's granny, that they're taking magic mushrooms that have been ground up into capsules by this Asian orderly, and Gun, who is then apparently it's awakening them from these catatonic states, and it's only because one of them is an artist and in a state of wakefulness, graffiti's all over the walls of one of the guest rooms, that Mulder turns around and goes, don't you have an Asian orderly here? And that's literally the only way that any connections are made to figure out anything. But yeah, so you start out with Scully does make, I will say, Scully does make the thing that, sometimes rape victims don't see the faces of their attackers and stuff like that, or it gets wiped from their memory. So there's that one little reference, but otherwise, like I say, her character just carries on. She just carries on working with the patients and that. And you're led to believe that maybe because these elderly people are being treated so badly by the staff at this home, that the ghosts are like taking revenge. They're trying to kill off the staff. But then it gives the impression that maybe these are just hallucinations of the patients. You have this one scene where the elderly granny, she sees these ghosts stood around Scully, like, leave her alone, and Scully's like stood there going, what? And it is genuinely creepy at that moment where you think that maybe she could be at threat. They don't touch her. Mulder's the one who gets trapped in a room with Terra Rothery, that gets then filled with water. And I'm just like, okay, so the ghosts are real? But yet the rest of the episodes keeps implying that maybe these people, these elderly people that have been taking the mushrooms, are the culprits. So it seems a little mixed, as this show is very good at doing. It wants to have a story, it wants to give you this paranormal element, but it doesn't want to fully commit. This is a problem of the show. It doesn't want to fully commit because it wants to believe, but then it's implied that was the cause at the end of the day, and anything scientific gets completely thrown out of the window. And everything just returns to normal at the end. And again, Mulder and Scully are so pointless in this episode. I mean, there's one orderly gets tricked out of a window and is hanging there. Mulder very ineffectually like, take my hand, and Scully with this chief lady like runs over, and then, you know, does the whole he's dead after he falls. It's a good episode with some slightly hammed up, but enjoyable acting. It's an odd one because it's not bad in any point. I think I would have to put it as an A, because I genuinely do enjoy it when I watch it. Do I want to put? I kind of want. I don't know. I'm torn. It's just problematic, and it just doesn't do much. No, you know what? I do enjoy it. I do. It's stupid. This episode has so many plot holes, but I do enjoy it. If I could, I would probably put it between the two ranks. But yeah, I think I'm gonna put it. I'm gonna put it in B. I'm so indecisive. That is a problem. This whole season, and this is what I'm saying, you'll see, like, all these episodes are going to be in these ranks mainly. This is such a good season. It's when you start to take the episodes individually and nitpick them, especially in the way that I'm doing. I think in a general sense, if you're just binge watching or whatever, they're okay. They're good. They're enjoyable. I love them. If you take it, more so if you're watching them individually. I binge watch these, and yeah, I found myself very critically viewing them. And as much as I like Excelsis Day, as much as I like all these ones in the B rank, yeah, it's just, yeah, it's a bit empty. It does feel like just a rip-off of Awakenings. Next up, we've got Aubrey, with guest star Terry O'Quinn. And this one has the very, very rare distinction of being written by a woman, Sarah B. Charno. And you can tell watching this episode that it's written by a woman. Just the depiction of women is so much different than the show's usual either victim, like person that's body can be manipulated, or femme fatale just there to make Scully jealous. It's a very different female character, BJ Morrow. She's this detective who works in the working man's club, and is having an affair with her married boss, Lieutenant Tillman, who's played by Terry O'Quinn. And she starts to have these visions, and you're like, well, is this like a past life? Is she doing it? And actually you find out that she's the daughter, is it daughter or granddaughter? I think she's the daughter of this victim, Mrs. Thibodeau. No, she is the granddaughter, because I think Thibodeau had a son who then had BJ. Anyway, sorry, I'm probably completely wrong. I will have to put a little thing at the bottom if I've completely messed up. It's a little more mixed. Again, this was 6 months ago that I watched these episodes last time, and it's a bit more of a vague memory than say how badly I messed up the Samuel in Miracle Man thing. But anyway, the point is that she is related to this victim who was attacked and sexually attacked by this guy Coakley, who also killed federal agents and stuff. And she starts to have flashes, basically, of what this guy did. She's seen it, like, through his eyes. And she starts finding these bodies, these skeletons, that were never found by anybody else out in the middle of nowhere and stuff. And I bring up about being written by a female writer because it's interesting seeing, like, the victims in this episode aren't true victims. They are victims and they have trauma, but they carry on. Like Mrs. Thibodeau, she's attacked later by BJ, who's possessed, and she still tries to rationalise with the woman and stuff like that, and it's just really interesting. We also in this episode have I think it's the first in the ongoing series of Scully's Bathroom Encounters. This is where Scully apparently hangs out with chicks in the ladies' toilets and has these really deep talks that gets information out of them. I would like to joke that Scully is totally onto Tillman and Morrow's affair, and Mulder's just like, what are you talking about? It's like, wow, Mulder, you are so clueless. But then both of them are clueless later on in their own relationship, so, whatever. I really enjoyed this episode. Brilliantly directed by Rob Bowman. Again, it's nice to see Terry O'Quinn in his first guest appearance out of 3. I genuinely enjoy this episode. It's well shot, it's dark, it's moody. And I like the characters. Good acting all round, etc. My biggest issue is the actual X-File. So you're left wondering if maybe, I think Mulder makes the assumption at one point that maybe it skipped a generation, that maybe BJ is evil. But you don't get that impression. You get the impression she's possessed by Coakley. But then she's clearly got some control, and then she... when she's attacking Mulder at the end, and she goes to kill Coakley, I think it is, and with his last breath, as Coakley takes his last breath, she just goes back to normal, just turns into a quivering wreck, and I'm like, okay, so was she possessed? There is the implication that maybe because she's pregnant with Tillman's baby, that maybe it's the boy, the baby boy inside her that's causing this stuff to surface. It seems a little bit of a jump. This show's good at them. I feel like it's, again, as I kind of said with Excelsis Day, it feels like it's kind of offering up possibilities, but not wanting to commit necessarily. So I do have a little bit of an issue with the X-File. This is also the episode that I always have to laugh at, because it's got the scene where they go to this basement where BJ's just broken into somebody's house, and Mulder and Scully are going down the stairs, and Gillian takes slips on the stairs and nearly falls but carries on, and you can see David like reach out for her, but they carry on shooting, and that's the take they went with. So it's just funny to see them in the background. But no, genuinely, I enjoy the episode. I have a little issue with the actual like solution, like the conclusion. But otherwise, no, I enjoy this one. It's not perfect by any means, but I would definitely put it up in A. Because yeah, I genuinely enjoy it. It's a little flaw. I kind of want to put it up in S, if I'm honest. I don't think it's anywhere near as good as these ones though, so that's why I'm not going to put it there. But definitely, this is not one I often check out. I have my ones that I go to. If I'm picking up this season, I'll easily pick up these ones first and foremost, and that's the problem with a lot of these episodes. I kind of found it with season 1, where you'll find episodes that you're like, actually, this is good. Why don't I go back to this one more? And maybe it's because I don't keep going back to them, that I enjoy them more. Aubrey is definitely not one I ever think to go back to. But I did enjoy it. So, yeah, I recommend it. Next up, though, is Irresistible, which is a really good episode. It's written by Chris Carter. This is one of his stronger episodes. My hesitation comes from the simple fact that I'm not the biggest fan of the presentation of Scully in this episode. She is really rocked by this case for some reason, and I think it plays into her abduction, and I think that's what they're trying to get at, maybe. They have her, this is our first encounter seeing her going to the counsellor Karen Kosev, who, seriously, if Kosev was my counsellor, I probably would have punched her in the face on the first encounter. But it's interesting to see Scully, who's been always up to this point, shown as this very prim and proper, in control of her emotions character that unfortunately in fanfic got her the Iron Queen and Ice Queen, Iron Queen, fucking Margaret Thatcher, the Ice Queen kind of moniker, which I've never been a fan of and seemed completely unfair. But Chris Carter did love to lean into that a little bit. So here he's trying to show her as more vulnerable, and I get it, but it just seems very weird to see her as somebody who is a pathologist, very, very unnerved by desecration of the dead, and as somebody who literally in the last episode looked like she was going to disconnect Coakley's oxygen and that in the last episode when he kept calling her little sister. I was waiting for her to punch him one in the face. For somebody who could face evil like that down so defiantly, it's quite difficult in a way to see her shrink down and essentially it come down to that she doesn't want to show emotion in front of Mulder, and I'm like, the shipper in me is like, oh, that's cute, and the other side of my brain is just like, really this is what we're going to go for? This whole thing that, the whole idea that, Scully was equal to Mulder, that she didn't need, again, a lot of this comes from her abduction. I'm not denying that whatsoever. There is also clearly some PTSD there and trauma that, as this show is very good at doing, unfortunately kind of sweeps onto the rug and makes out like, nah, it's nothing. And she clearly needs to talk about it, and I think that we get to see her with Kosev is a really interesting thing, and I do value its inclusion, but the fact that she's like this, like from the start of the episode, I don't know, there's just something that niggles at me. Not as much as the really, really bizarre thing that Mulder essentially took her to this crime scene to take her on a date to see, like, American football at the Metrodome. That is really random. I do love the fact that she doesn't, like, shun him away. She's just like, okay, she just accepts it. And I'm like, where is this coming from? Chris Carter, Mr. Platonic Activity, is really a bit of a dick when it comes to teasing the whole more than friends kind of thing without, like, wanting to commit to it. And I wouldn't want them to be more than friends in this anyway, no matter how much I love the hug at the end, which is a very friendly hug. There's a lot of shippiness in this episode, and I do think if you're taking it in the context of, like, from her abduction and Mulder's, like, insecurities, especially the ones we saw in Firewalker, I think there's a lot to be said there about hiding the trauma from each other and stuff like that. But the X-File, creepy as all fuck, without question. Nick Chinland, who plays Donnie Pfaster, the grossest, just kind of necrophiliac, based, inspired by the likes of people like Ed Gein and that. And I do highly recommend you looking. I highly recommend the Book of the Unexplained, the Book of the Unexplaineds anyway. But yeah, it goes into in that it goes into the inspirations for this episode. I highly recommend checking those out. But yeah, I just think as an episode that shows that, this show deals with so many paranormal mutants and aliens and all that kind of thing, that sometimes the monster is the person next door, and it's genuinely spine-chilling. And I can't help, whenever I see Nick Chilland and stuff now, I can't help but, and bless him, he seems really sweet. It's really difficult to see him when he's playing this really nice guy character in something, because all I see is Donny Faster, and I'm just waiting for him to go, girly girl. Honestly, shampoo and all that stuff will never be the same again. If anybody ever says, you take a bath, I may just cry and run away. But I genuinely, on that side of things, amazing. Some iffy writing, but otherwise, I think this is, I could be wrong, I think this is directed by Kim Manners. I think. I could be wrong. I think actually he might have done the next one. I don't know. Anyway. Yeah, I think he might have done the next one. Anyway. But it is, I think it's one of Chris Carter's stronger episodes. I do love the Mulder Scully interactions. I love I do genuinely, you know, for my complaining, I genuinely actually really like the opening up. There's something really just intimate and fascinating in the grand scheme of the progression of the I guess in a way the MSR, but more so just the partnership of Scully showing her feelings and not closing off to Mulder. So much of the time we are exposed to her just going, I'm fine. And that has become a fanfic staple. And especially a staple of like Mulder going, really? In fanfic. But I think there's a lot to love here, without question. This is an S rank. It is a little problematic. I struggle a little bit with it, and I do struggle a little bit with, I get what it's doing when it shows Donny open the closet door where Scully's tied up, and she sees these different faces of evil culminating in this like very demonic face. And for the time, I think at the time the implication was just it was her seeing the faces of evil. Unfortunately, the Return of Donny saw Reverend Orison seeing a much more actual demon, and that muddies the waters a little bit for me. But I think at the time, it's a really good episode. Always nice to see Mulder anxious and worried about you know, his pretty partner. And yeah, I just enjoy the acting and everything. I think it's really good. Very nicely shot. Yeah, without question, S rank. As much as it pains me in a way to acknowledge that, you know, Chris Carter did bring us some good episodes, which again, we're in season 1, so I think easily like later stuff has made me a little jaded and cynical. But anyway, the final episode today, this is going to have to unfortunately be a two-part video because I've waffled on too long. There is a lot to talk about here. We have a lot of episodes left, but it seems appropriate, and this video has just gone for forever. I was editing and I saw I was editing earlier parts while my camcorder was charging, and I was just like, oh my god, this video is going on forever. But I think there's a lot to talk about here because of the mythology and stuff, so I do apologise, there's going to be a second video. But let's end with, appropriately, James Wong and Glenn Morgan's final episode for a while, Die Hand die Verletzt. And I do apologise to all German people, or any people who speak German, for the butchering of that title, because I never learnt German. I've always, to be honest, to shorthand it, I've always just gone Die Hand die Verletzt. So I know it's D or something instead, but yeah. So anyway, basically German for the hand that wounds. This is, I'm pretty sure this is the one that's directed by Kim Manners. this was their last episode, and it ends quite appropriately with a nice message on the board from Mrs. Paddock, who I accidentally always refer to as Mrs. Peacock. Did you hear that? Okay, must be a cat. Miss Paddock leaves a message on the board at the end that says it's been great working with you, and it's a nice little message from Morgan and Wong, but it just seems a little weird because it's based on, so it's set at this school where members of the teaching faculty are demon worshippers basically. So they worship, and they're doing these satanic rituals in the school after their meetings and stuff like that. Which, you know what, doesn't even remotely surprise me. If you told me the faculty of some of my schools were having teachers' meetings and then summoning the devil, I wouldn't have been remotely surprised. And the fact that it's set in like high school, with these teenagers seems even more appropriate. And I think it's playing into a very Buffy the Vampire Slayer kind of, metaphor for teenagers and stuff like that, I guess. But it gets a little muddled when then Mrs. Paddock comes in to essentially, I think she's been summoned by possible accident because of these teens that have been like taking the witchcraft books and saying the spells out in the to get laid basically as an excuse to get laid out in the forest with their other halves, or at least fondle each other a bit out in the woods, and so Mrs. Paddock comes along seemingly to clear up the situation, like to get rid of these morons, devil worshippers. But she's not, like, a good person. Like, she's terrifying. So I'm left going, wait, is she supposed to be a good guy or a bad guy? Are the faculty the bad people, or what? Because they're willing to make sacrifices. They nearly kill Mulder and Scully at the end. I do love Mulder's protecting Scully by covering her body. Not that that would have done much against a shotgun at point blank range, but, it's still sweet. And at least it meant, in a way, we got Mulder and Scully shower time, I guess. But it's just, I really like this episode. It's really well written and that. I say that, but I don't. It goes on. They have this, Mulder and Scully have this interview with this teenager who implies that she's been the victim of her stepfather's demonic rituals. And it goes on. Her description goes on and on, while Mulder and Scully sit there sympathetically listening, and we're left afterwards not knowing if that was even real. And you're like, we just took up like 10 minutes with this discussion. It goes on a little bit, but I find it fascinating, and it's genuinely atmospheric. I think the story's a little thin on the ground and doesn't know what it wants to be doing, but it is brilliantly shot. It's genuinely atmospheric. I know I keep saying that, sorry. And there's a lot here to like. I don't think it's perfect by any means, and I think there are problems with the story making it stretch. Somebody correct me, like, easily. This is one of those episodes that I always feel like I'm coming away with the wrong conclusions. But yeah, I'm just like, what was even the point of this episode? Except to get Mulder and Scully wet in the showers. And a creepy scene where a snake eats the guy whole. It's like, okay. So, yeah, I really like that. I have to put this episode in Ado. I've watched this, I've genuinely watched this episode quite a few times. But I just feel it's a bit plot holey. And not Morgan One's strongest ones. I feel this is more an amazing display of directing more than necessarily storytelling, and that's why I have to put it there. I can't put it any higher. I wouldn't put it any lower by any means. But yeah, that's Diane de Villiers. And I'm going to leave that there for now, guys. Please share your thoughts in the comments. I am sorry this video has gone on way too long. I'm going to edit it down as much as I can. But please, I will put in the description the link for the second part, which will be up next week. This has taken me this video alone has taken me 4 or 5 weeks to record and edit. So hopefully these last 10, 11 episodes or so, I should get through quite quickly. I think things are going to get slowed down though when we hit the Colony Endgame and Anasazi episodes, because obviously they're mythology episodes. And that's why I wanted to take a break here. Otherwise this video would be like 4 hours long. But thanks so much for watching, guys. Please share your thoughts. Please share your favourite episodes. Like I say, not saying any of these episodes are bad by any means. Except for maybe 3. I just, yeah, it's a bit of a hodgepodge when you think too much about them. But anyway, I'm not going to delay this outro any longer. Go watch the second part next week. Link will be in the description once it's available. And yeah, thanks for watching. Please take care, and I'll see you somewhere down the line.